Hello, this is Foxy. Today I wanted to show you On the Other Side by Carrie Hope Fletcher and read the first chapter. And yeah, I finished the book yesterday and I really liked it. Let's look inside. There's a really nice design with lots of images that are important for the story, but I won't say in what kind they are important because I don't want to spoil anything for you. And I'm gonna read what's written inside here. Your soul is too heavy to pass through this door. Leave the weight of the world in the world from before. Evie Snow is 82 when she quietly passes away in her sleep, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. It's the way most people wish to leave the world, but when Evie reaches the door of her own private haven, she finds that she's become her 27-year-old self, and the door won't open. Evie's soul must be light enough to pass through, so she needs to get rid of whatever is making her soul heavy. For Evie, this means unburdening herself of the 3 secrets which have weighed her down for over 50 years. So she must find a way to reveal them before it's too late. As Evie begins the journey of a lifetime, she learns more about life and love than she ever thought possible. And somehow, some way, she may also find her way back to the only man she ever truly loved. Now I'm gonna show you the cover from the inside. It's the same on the outside, but it's printed a little differently and it doesn't have the title in the middle. I think the cover is really pretty, and when you finish the book you'll understand the single images, and I think that's a really nice way of designing the cover so that you understand it properly after you've finished the actual book. And it has the same little images at the back of the book again. And I'm gonna read, it's in the middle, the heart. He noticed she had a twinkle. It was right there in her eyes. Maybe it was the slight scrunch of her nose when she smiled at him which made the corner of her eyes crease that caused it. Or maybe it was the way her eyebrows framed her face. But no matter what it was, when he saw the twinkle, all he heard in his head was his heart laughing. gonna start reading the first chapter. I want to apologize in advance because, as you can hear, I'm not a native English speaker. I do have an accent, and maybe I don't know a word or two, I don't know, or need to think about how to pronounce it before I actually do. So please bear with me. It's not my first language, and I do the best I can. New arrival. Steady lights flickered across her closed eyelids. In her ears she could hear the rhythmic hum and rattle of a train on its tracks. Evie Snow opened her eyes, expecting to find herself on the 2032, pulling into an unfamiliar station in an unexplored part of the city, having drifted off to sleep, as she so often did when she was younger. Instead, when her eyelids fluttered open, like two Twitter-parted butterflies, she found herself in the lift of the building she had lived in when she was 27 years old. She glanced at the button road and saw that the number 7 was lit up, beaming at her. The door slid open, and the rickety lift gave a tiny shudder, wobbling Evie's already unsteady stance, urging her to get out and keep going. She was sure she hadn't been in this lift before she'd fallen asleep. She was sure she hadn't been in this building for over 50 years. Evie gaze flickered up to the polished gold surface of the lift's walls. She noticed someone else in the reflection, someone standing exceedingly close to her. She spun around to catch the woman she'd seen, but the lift was empty. She was alone. Looking back into the gold, she examined the only reflection it showed her, that of a woman in her 20s, blonde curls tumbling over her shoulders in an unruly fashion, curls that Evie had only seen as thin and grey for a long time. Chocolate eyes stared back in disbelief, full of life and vibrancy, eyes that hadn't yet forgotten how to shine. The skin on this woman's face was smoother than her own. It hadn't yet been withered and worn from years of crying, laughing, frowning and smiling. Evie reached a hand up to her own face and felt the silky skin under her fingers. A quick breathy laugh escaped her lips, like she'd been pushed in the gut, forcing the memories of this face to the forefront of her mind. She then tilted her head, so did her mirror image, and when she smiled at the sudden realization that this reflection was indeed her own, the beautiful 27-year-old Evie in the polished gold smiled back too. Evie finally stepped out of the lift, and the heels of her favorite shoes clicked against the marble floor. She called them her carpet-bag shoes because of their resemblance of the carpet bag that held Mary Poppins' impossible treasures. The hem of the floral dress swished around her knees, and suddenly the warmth of her cherished emerald green coat sank into her bones, and she was enveloped in a snugness she'd not felt for a very long time. She wiggled her fingers, realizing that her left hand did not yet bear an engagement ring that had only weighed down her hand with its extravagant too big emerald. It had weighed down her heart too, with its significance. She held her hands in front of her, smiled at their emptiness, then swung them by her sides all the way down the corridor. As she turned a sharp corner that led to her apartment, she stopped dead in her tracks at the sight of her neighbor, Colin Autumn, a man who'd always been kind to her, if somewhat introverted and quiet. She remembered him as a tall, well-built man, the Oxford professor type. He favored tweed jackets with hued elbow patches and sweater vests, often orange or green in color. The smell of his pipe had never been a pleasant aroma, but he had a sweet, rarely revealed smile, one that Evie had managed to coax out of him only a handful of times. He died suddenly of a heart attack while Evie had lived next door. It was a shock to see him here at all, let alone in such a state. Mr. Autumn was now a shell of his former self, huddled on the floor by the door to his apartment, clutching his knees to his chest and rocking himself back and forth. His tweed jacket and sweater vest were gone, and instead he wore faded white and blue striped pajama that seemed to swamp his frail, sunken frame. His skin was white and almost transparent. He was quivering, muttering something under his breath, and as Evie cautiously approached him, keeping her back to the opposite wall, she thought she heard him say, "Heavy, I'm too heavy." Evie reached tentatively into her right-hand pocket, hoping she'd feel the familiar shape of her keys. Yes, there they were, cold in a slightly clammy hand. She thought. She brought them out and jangled them happily, momentarily forgetting the sight of Mr. Autumn in his hysterical state. She quickly slotted the key into the lock, but her heart sank into the carpet-bag shoes when it did not turn. She tried again. No luck. And again, a little harder. Nothing. Now she desperately twisted her fingers against the key, but it just wouldn't budge. Tears picked her eyes. She stepped back and looked at the door. It was definitely hers, apartment 72. The gold numbers shone brightly on the polished wooden door, taunting her now that she couldn't get in. She looked at Colin, who had stopped rocking and was watching her. "Mr. Autumn? Miss Snow? It's been years." His voice crackled like an old record player. "Where are we?" She crouched by his side. She wanted to embrace him, but he looked so weak and fragile, she was afraid her arms may break him. "Where we are, you ask? We lived here for years. You know this place." "Of course, but I can't get in. Too heavy. You're too heavy. Oh goodness, Evie. Not you too. Too heavy. Too heavy." And with that he returned to his rocking and muttering. Evie stood and stumbled back to her door. As she beat her fists against it, a few tears spilled over and ran down her rosy cheeks. She clenched her eyes shut, wishing with all her heart she knew what was going on. "Why can't I get in?" she whimpered. Through her closed eyelids she saw yellow dots twinkling. She quickly opened her eyes to see her door sparkling with thousands of delicate little lights dancing about the wood. They moved smoothly into formation, creating words for her to read. "Your soul is too heavy to pass through this door. Leave the weight of the world in the world from before. Once it is lighter, your key shall then turn, and you will be able to have what you yearn." My soul is too heavy? What does that mean? She took off her coat, now feeling hot and flushed. Taking off your coat won't help you get any lighter, little Evie. A short man stood at the end of the corridor. Mr. Autumn had gone quiet. and Evie could see that he was now sucking his thumb, his eyes squeezed shut, so tightly that they turned into mere lines. The man who had spoken was in his mid-40s, but looked far older. A cigarette was hanging out of the side of his mouth, but he talked like it wasn't there at all. Dr. Liffey. Evie let out a sigh of relief when she saw him. He was a plump, slightly balding Dutchman with the sweetest button nose, who had been the apartment building's doorman. Warmth radiant off him with inexhaustible waves, as it always had done when Evie had lived here. Dr. Liffey knew the name of everyone in the building, and all the business too, not because he pried, but because he couldn't help but trust him. He made sure everyone got the letters and packages. At Christmas time he snuck bags of chocolate coins in with the posts. He always thought of himself as a bit of a matchmaker, and was always trying to pair off the single apartment dwellers. On one occasion, long before Evie moved to the building, he succeeded. It had been honored to be an usher at the wedding of Denny Thorne and Rose Green. From then on, he referred to himself as Dr. Liffey, Liffey being the Dutch word for love. Eventually, it caught on until no one in the building remembered his real name. Evie was one of his favorite tenants because she took him cups of hot chocolate when it got cold, and chilled pink lemonade in the summer when his little desk fan just wouldn't do. He passed away soon after she had moved out of apartment 72, and she'd attended his funeral along with most of the people who'd lived there past and present. The apartment building had been his favorite place in the world. Can't begin to tell you how pleased I am to see you. Evie went to Dr. Liffey, and he gave a throaty love as he embraced her, a little awkwardly, as she was a good foot taller than he was. I wish I could say the same. I do hope it wasn't painful. Did you go in your sleep? His English was impeccable. If not for the very slight accent and the pride he had in his country, Evie wouldn't have known he was Dutch. He took the cigarette from his lips and stuffed it out in a wall-mounted ashtray in the corridor. Never usually smoked inside the building, but strangely, Evie couldn't smell the smoke at all. She frowned. Not sure I follow. Oh, Evie, gave her an affectionate smile, tinged with sadness. This is the afterlife. Well, it's the afterlife's waiting room, at least. He reached out to her and they linked arms as they started to lead her back to the lift. The afterlife's waiting room, she repeated, trying to make sense of it all. She felt like she'd fallen down the rabbit hole, except it hadn't led her to a fantastical world where animals could talk and tell the time. Instead, she was in a world that belonged in the past, where people long dead were alive once more. You see, when you die, provided you've lived a good life on earth, always trying to be the best version of yourself that you can be, you go to your favorite place, Dr. Liffey explained. Heaven? Evie asked. Her brow furrowed in confusion. Ah, yes, but your own personal heaven. You've passed on, Evie. I'm afraid you're dead. Squeezed her hand. Of course, she thought. Yes, I think I remember, now that you mention it. She concentrated hard, squeezing the memories out of her head. Lived a good long life. I married. Had 2 children. I was, she paused, happy. and I died with my children and grandchildren at my bedside. Yes, I remember now. Her lips turned up at the corners, and she lost herself in her mind's eye, recalling images of her children all grown up. Then she shook her head slightly and brought herself back to Dr. Liffey, who was standing before her, ushering her into the lift. Evie looked at herself in the polished gold and saw that she still looked 27. It's not that Evie was vain, but when she'd been so fond of her own assets, like her caramel curls and her chocolate eyes, it had been hard to watch them fade into shades of grey, along with all the life and excitement she had once felt. Clearly you were at your happiest here, in this very building, as was I. So when we passed on, we came back here. Dr. Liffey pressed button number 2, but it didn't light up. Damn thing, pressed it again, with a little more force. Then the yellow light shone dimly through the small frosted number. However, he paused, still looking at the button, a troubled expression on his face. There's always a catch. You may have 3 wishes, but you can never wish for more wishes. Evie chuckled lightly, but the look on Liffey's face gave her the feeling that it might not be as easy as she'd like. It's only a small catch, Miss Snow. You couldn't open your door, could you? Evie shook her head. That's because you're holding on to possessions that aren't allowed to pass through with you. Possessions? But I didn't bring anything with me. I found myself in these clothes when I arrived here, wearing these shoes, with my keys in my coat pocket. She felt again for the keys. When her fingers wrapped around them, she pressed them into her palm as hard as she could, forcing herself to believe that they were there, and she was here, and everything was all right. Not all possessions are marital. Not all possessions are material, my dear girl. The lift gave a sudden jolt and started to shudder its way down the shaft. Dr. Liffey hit the wall with a clenched white knuckled fist, suddenly disproportionately angry with the situation. Evie gave his arm a gentle pat. At least the doors opened, slowly, as though they didn't want to reveal what lay beyond them. Evie, Dr. Liffey took a deep, unsteady breath. This is the 2nd floor. Yes. She waited for him to continue, but he said nothing, nor did he move to exit the lift. There's something wrong? I'm sorry, but I've not been down here in a long while. Try to avoid it as much as possible. But you must see what's down here. He took a step towards the door, holding tightly to her arm. Her souls are very delicate. There are certain things that can weigh them down. When we feel guilty, hold in feelings, bite our tongues, keep secrets, that puts a great burden on our fragile souls. These man-made weights attach themselves to our spirits and start to drag us under. Dr. Liffey hadn't looked at Evie once since they'd arrived on the 2nd floor. His gaze was concerned, firmly up her head. At the approaching turn in the hallway, he stepped slowing. Blue-tinged lights flickered over their heads, and electricity buzzed. To be able to pass on, to step through your door, you must rid yourself of those weights. Let your feelings be known. Open your heart. Forgive people. Whatever those burdens are, you need to let them go. Otherwise, there's no way through the door, and you'll become stuck. As they moved further down the corridor, the sound of groaning became audible. Not just one voice, but several in a strange and aching chorus. Dr. Liffey, why are we on the 2nd floor? Evie was now clutching his sweaty hand, the fingers interlinked as They edged towards the haunting voice. He sucked in a breath. This is the floor in which the more reluctant residents of this building reside. They turned the corner, and Evie gasped.